Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And today, actually, so last week on the podcast, you and I sat down and we were talking about, reaching or getting close to the 20-year mark for Berg as an organization. And we talked a fair amount about sort of those first 10 years or so, right? You being obviously the original employee, but that the next closest employee being Joe Griffith, and he's been with us for 11 years. So kind of like that gap. You kind of are the only one with that primal knowledge of that gap. But we started talking about sort of that next 9 years, that next 8 or 9 years, right? And how that was the same but different.
Very much so. When we were talking about it, it's like, okay, well, what about, from your perspective, Brian? Like, that's about when you joined the team. You think that we were maybe about 15 people when you came over from the dark side. And, we figured, hey, let's talk about those 9-ish years from your perspective, what you've seen, just kind of get a different vibe of how the last almost 10 years have been.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to think about because July will be 9 years. So I'm 8.5 years or whatever it's been. And I always think that Dan and I started around the same time, but Dan is actually about 2 years before me, roughly. Because all of our stories or experiences are very similar, right? And that probably speaks to the bulk of our time being spent together. Even as this office transition. So yeah, so when I started, I think it was probably less than 15 people. I'd have to go back and check. Most of them obviously being in the field and here in the office, it was yourself, myself, and Dan. Deb Hertzler was here when I got here, and then
was Blair here or Jahira here?
No, I don't know if they had sort of just transitioned away because okay. So Melanie, there was a young lady named Melanie at the front desk, and I think Luke was in the shop. Or overseeing the shop. And then there was a young lady, Kelly, who was working part-time. I think she was either just wrapping up high school or in high school as like an intern.
I think it was an intern at first. At least definitely that's how it started, as an intern for her.
Yeah. And so the rest of the team was in the field, right? And we didn't really do a lot of like crews like that were designated crews, right? And like they were like, the rest of our folks were in the field, but they could be working on the same site all at once or a couple of different sites, and people just sort of filled in where was needed.
We had a lot of utility players at that point.
Yeah, for sure. When I got here, we were doing what at the time was, I think, the biggest job we'd ever done. And it sort of turned into the biggest job. I think when it was bid, it was two separate jobs over here at the landfill.
That was our first landfill job.
And the way that job morphed a little bit definitely turned into a larger job than I think you guys had originally expected.
I remember, I think it doubled over the life of the job.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I had zero construction knowledge, but it was kind of like trial by fire for a little while.
I think everybody in those days, trial by fire was the method. It's like, okay, here's your first day. Here's where you're sitting. Good luck. I don't know. Was I in the office a lot? Was I running around a lot? I really don't remember. Unfortunately, some of life has been a blur just at different times. But
yeah,
was I here a lot to like provide support, or was mainly like, okay, figure that out. I'm gonna be gone. If you need something, call me on the phone.
Yeah, no, you were here. You were here a lot.
Okay.
So you're like, you know, geez, 10 years ago, but you're you had you had a few in-field responsibilities still. Like you would still go oversee or run a job if we like needed an extra super or foreman or whatever. But it wasn't happening a lot. You would definitely jump into a machine when somebody needed an extra operator or something like that still at that point in time. Um, but no, yeah, you were here and you know, your role was all very I would say like collaborative, right? And I think part of it was you know, Dan had been here when I got here. Dan had been here for about 2 years or almost 2 years or something of that nature. But a lot of what you were trying to do, it was sort of transition some of those day-to-day field supervision responsibilities away from you so that you could be more about leading the business. And I think that was like a big task at that point in time, right? And that's probably true of any small business owner. Like when they go from being the one who does everything to empowering other people to do things, some people still want to deal with the guy, right? So,
Yes. Well, that no, I mean, both you and Dan came from outside the industry, so the learning curve was a little more intense in the beginning, and trying to kind of, now it sounds funny to say, oh, like coach through, but that's what it was, which is we didn't have fancy words for it. It was just trying to like,
right.
all right, hey, did you remember to do this? Did you remember to do this? Did you remember what about this? Because it was just asking the questions to hopefully get them to, get you guys to think through what you needed to learn in a quick time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It was interesting for me because like none of none of what I was being asked to do required skills I didn't have, but it was like trying to do it in a foreign language. Right? Yeah, because having been from outside of the construction industry, um,
Construction finance is completely different than almost all other finance, isn't it?
yeah, a little bit, right, for sure. And a lot of it had to do with the terminology. I just didn't know the work. I didn't know what we were trying to accomplish necessarily. And so, I felt like at times I was like always trying to play a little bit of catch up. Like what am I, what has to happen next? What am I doing?
So your office used to be next to my office downstairs, and so if I yelled out, "Hey, bill 8 hours of the track hoe and 2 hours of something else," you're like, what does that mean? Like, because I'm using internal baseball terminology. It's like, oh yeah, that means whatever, $100 an hour for this, and $80 for this. But I was using the machines versus the
Yeah. Yeah. I was
the
like,
dollars.
what are those things? I don't even know what those things are. Like, did you buy that today? So, yeah.
Ignorance is bliss at that point, right?
It was for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I still remember negotiating with you, shall we say, and I was actually away for a couple of days, and we were talking on the phone. And when you came in, like you were a very big, important piece, but an expensive piece to the organization at that point. Like it was like, oh my goodness, we're going to commit this much resources to someone to help us with this stuff, and pay dividends. But it was at that point, it was like you're looking at the wrong end of that number. You're just like, how are we going to make enough money to pay for this guy? I don't know. We'll figure it out somehow. He has to figure it out because he's got to find it.
That was me. I had to find the money.
Here you go. You have to create your own salary.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting for me because I didn't know what else to expect, right? And so those first couple of years all felt very similar. It just and like I'm trying to think of when that was. Was that geez. So
I was just after the big snow year. Like you came in probably the year or so after
Yeah,
that.
it was like 15,
14, 15, yeah.
something like
15, I
that.
guess 9, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah,
So it was like 2 years after the big snow year.
July of 15 or something like that. Um, and we were kind of in construction in general, I think, was in a period of time there though where it just felt like it was never going to stop.
Right.
Right. I hadn't been here in, the '08, the '09 years when, certain segments of construction just kind of disappeared for a little while. And in like 2015, 16, 17 ish, whatever, it just felt like we were never going to run out of work. Like
Right.
you could do as much work as you wanted to. And,
If you could get the people and the machines, there was work available to you.
yeah, so it was kind of wild for me. And then, we went through a little period of time where, like, I'm trying to think, maybe that was 17, 18, where some of our, like, we had to kind of like adjust a little bit. We had to kind of think about how we bid work or how we approached work because we had that every man is sort of a Swiss Army knife sort of approach. We did a couple of things and just a lot of a couple things, right? So we did a fair amount of work in the landfill world, at least a fair amount for us, which comparatively is almost nothing than compared to some of these larger companies. But we did a fair amount of like miscellaneous stuff, right? We called it residential, we call it special projects, but it was other stuff, not really commercial work, but also not really residential work. We weren't like building homes, but and then we sort of went through like a period where, from a bidding perspective, we sort of missed on a couple of things that usually were the home run hitters for us, and we had to like not worry about filling in the gaps otherwise. And so we went through and kind of like evaluated, like, how do we bid, what types of work, and that was probably the first time we really tried to, in my experience, or from my perspective at least, like say, all right, we're gonna keep certain groups of people together so that they can keep doing certain types of work, because jumping guys back and forth became actually more haphazard than it was worth, right? Guys would be in the beginning of a project and not at the end, or guys would try and jump in the middle to fill a hole and have to sort of like play catch up, and just wasn't real clean. And not that we don't have Swiss Army knives still, but we have fewer of them, and they're mostly in that special projects residential division, right?
Well, yeah, when you're mentioning some of these things, memory lane, but I remember that first job you were talking about, the landfill. There was one day, I think at that point we had 22 people on the team, and I think 20 out of the 22 were on that job site for that day. And that's kind of how it was that everybody went to where, like, pack of bees or whatever it was just a swarm. It was like, okay, go do this for a while, then go do this, and then a guy might be running a small job, but then all of a sudden he gets put on a big job, and then all of a sudden he's just an operator, and like kind of back and forth, and it wasn't really designated. And part of that is my responsibility, but I never was big on titles. I was never big on delineating any of that. It was just like, hey, whatever you're needed on, that day, that's what you are. And then people really wanted to kind of have some more definition. And so we had to kind of work through that, because before that it was just everybody can do something and figure it out that day and go from there. And then, kind of getting the planning piece in place and try to be a little more strategic, which definitely you guys are helpful with that, because that's really not my strong suit, because it's, as we talked about before, day to day is the mental way that I've always done stuff. It's not like that long-term piece.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, so those like first 5 years or so, maybe not quite that long, maybe 4 years or whatever, just were like a tornado. And and it was a lot of fun. I think I'm grayer because of it, probably.
You and me
but
both.
it was like sort of an exciting time to be in construction and excavation in general. And then here we are the last 4.5 years or whatever, and they've been like totally different than the first 4 or 5.
What do you think? Everything in life about 5-year segments almost?
I think it's supposed to be like, I don't know, 7-year cycles or something maybe. But yeah, that, but it just was different. Obviously, in the heart of that, we've got 2020 COVID year, the year that which shall not be named.
Yes. So that took more than a year, unfortunately, to kind of get through that whole situation.
Yeah. And like, on the back end of it, feeling like we're coming out of it, we've gotten, internally, we talk about it a little bit. We've had some hiccups with some personnel, and hiccups with some of our bids and some of our jobs. And it's just been different. It's all been growth, and it's all been developmental, and yeah.
I think what I was going to say is that, two things that in the last 5 years that are interesting is, one is that like professional development, has definitely changed, because the first 5 years you were kind of just figuring it out, getting it done day by day.
Right.
And now you're part of a couple of the different organizations that can kind of get you some outside perspective. But I think one thing that, like, as every phase goes by and you're in the middle of it and you're like, holy cow, this is a challenge. And then you talk to someone that's been doing it longer, and they're like, oh yeah, that happens about that time. You're like, why didn't somebody tell me? It would have been a lot easier to go through if I would have been able to understand that that's just kind of the natural progression of how things operate. There's no easy way around it, and there's just through. It's the only other way through.
Right. That's it. Through it's the only way to go, for sure.
But yeah, that, and then I think that the last couple years have been unique because you've been starting to build. I mean, the other thing that really you didn't mention, but like the first 5 years, you had more hats on your head. I mean, like, we still joke about it. You have like a bucket hat.
Yeah.
It has like different things on different sides because you do a bunch of stuff. But before this, you still do a bunch of stuff, but you have some people to help with some of those areas. But before this, you just spun the hat every day to a different thing.
For sure. Yeah. That is definitely different. Yeah.
It was like whoever's, he's in the office. It's the catch-all for everything that's not in the field.
Right. Yeah. And it's still that way a little bit, but it definitely has changed. I've got in the last 5 years here, really developed a really nice team, and had to, because of the way our organization's grown and the different ways that our resources have been pulled, but really developed a good team. Certainly, came and went, but Kelly was a big part of that for a number of years, really helping kind of like formalize and make that, like, our payroll process, et cetera, kind of just a no-brainer. She
changed multiple times in there too, and she was able to ride the waves.
She did. Yeah, she really did. She jumped around a bunch of times in regards to responsibilities based on where we needed her and when we needed her. And she had some stuff happen in her life that sort of caused some transition in how her role looked. And we were able to like work through that, and it worked perfectly. And now she
saved a couple extra years out of it, because otherwise it would have been gone a lot sooner.
Yeah, exactly. Not long after that, Kelsey's still with us. The way Kelsey's grown has been tremendous, and the amount of the resource that she's been to our organization, and certainly in the last 3 years for sure, but she's been with us going on 5 years, and she just really has like just jumped into every role we've ever asked her to take on. We had a Tracy, and we, before that HR role, like having, we did a lot of things really well, but didn't give things the attention that they deserved before.
Did enough to get by would
Yeah.
be the term I think would be
Yeah.
most used.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How do we get a handbook? We needed one. Okay, cool. Call
Yep.
the HR company and get them to send us over one. They'll put our front page
Put
on
one
it.
together, put our logo on it. Yeah. 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 So we
It was
did
all cut and paste at that point.
absolutely. Yeah. But we did enough to get it done. We did enough to make sure we were doing it right. But we didn't give it the attention to detail that was necessary. And Tracy has really added that on the HR side. And now fast forward and we've added, Blair from a safety perspective. We've added Decker to support me with some of the financial responsibilities. Kelly has transitioned away for family reasons and to go grow in her life personally. And then Aubrey has really stepped up and filled that role from a payroll perspective. So I've been very fortunate to internally inside this building grow those resources, and then certainly outside the building, the number of people that we've got in places to kind of help keep the wheels greased and rolling has changed a lot for sure.
Well, that and the interesting thing too, I think, is that as we've transitioned and become a bigger organization, new opportunities have presented themselves to us that we wouldn't even had it at a previous thing. Different insurance options, different banking options, and so it's like, okay, we finally got our handle on the original stuff, or we kind of felt we finally had our hands around the original stuff. And it's like, okay, we're going to take that toy away from you, give you a whole different toy. And it's like, we had finally just figured out the first, like, where we were playing in that sandbox, and then someone just pulled the sandbox away and gave us a different sandbox. And then we had to relearn a whole new group of vendors and, 401k, same thing, like all these different things. We're like, all right, we got this. Oh no, there's a whole nother layer of this. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that way, I think that the second 5 years or 4.5 years or whatever has been just as exciting from a growth and challenge perspective as the first 4 or so was.
Yeah, well, in the second 4 years too. I mean, you got 2 years in there that whether it used to be BC or AD, after death before Christ, and now it's before COVID, after COVID kind of thing. It's like that window in there was just a blur because we were one of the lucky states where they decided construction wasn't essential, and so that just created a whole extra time and challenge in there that we had to navigate through. And you guys were really good to be able to keep us lights on and figure out how to work through that process, which was not just the normal day to day. It was a whole new layer that magically appeared overnight.
Yeah. Well, I think that if anything, that's like one thing that that I think our team is exceptional at is adapting, right?
Adjust on the fly.
Yeah, adapting and adjusting. We're fortunate, I think, in a lot of ways. We've got a lot of good people inside the building and outside the building who have got we've got the right amount of experience, but also the right amount of not being too deeply rooted in sort of traditions or the way things were, so to speak, so that we can continue to figure it out as we go.
Well, I think the other thing that really I think has changed, and it kind of doesn't go back and forth, but it does a little bit just based on need. But like the process of who we're looking for to join the team has gotten stronger in being part of, the team versus just people that can do the work. I think there's been a lot more emphasis in the last amount of time, because there for a while it was, you're available, you're able to join the team.
Right? Yeah.
And then, sometimes you learn through that, unfortunately, through valuable situations. But it seems to me that there's been a little bit more focus put on the character and the interest of the person to be part of what we're doing here versus just
Right.
they're in our industry and we can bring them to join us.
Yeah, and I think we've found, and we'll continue to learn this lesson, I'm sure, but the right people make the culture stronger, and sometimes you don't figure it out on day one, right? The wrong people can tend to put cracks in the armor or chinks in the armor, but the right people make the culture stronger.
No, definitely. Well, I think that's been another walk down memory lane of sorts.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. At some point, we're going to do like the next 10, right? We're going to we're going
to be doing this 10 more years.
Make projections
about. I'll tell you, man, we're going to, in 10 years, look back on these 10 years.
10 years, we'll look back on the 10 years when we get to 30. Okay. Yeah.
No. I don't even know if we'll be having microphones at that point. It'll be,
who knows what it'll be like. Who knows what that technology will look like. Yeah, we'll just, like all of our daily conversations will just be recorded. So we just choose the bits and pieces we want to broadcast.
AI will be doing it for us.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we'll catch you on another episode.